Good afternoon. I'm Rich Terapak. I'm a past board chair for CMC, and it's great to see everyone here today. I'm with the law firm of Porter, Wright, Morris, and Arthur. Today's forum, Judicial Votes Count, is brought to us with the support of Porter Wright, the Daily Reporter, in partnership with the League of Women Voters and the Ohio State Bar Association, all of whom are well represented here today. Let's thank them. Advocating for improvements in the Ohio judicial system is one of the basic duties of the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, particularly since the passage of the Modern Courts Amendment in 1968, almost 50 years ago. Ohio's Chief Justices have consistently played a leadership role in advocating for reforms, changes, and improvements in the system. This is consistent with the Code of Judicial Conduct, which states, "A judge should initiate and participate in activities for the purpose of promoting public understanding of and confidence in the administration of justice." Clearly, this role is both a profession and a passion for our speaker, who has spent years researching, writing, and advocating for judicial reform. Please welcome the 10th Chief Justice and first woman of in Ohio history to lead the Ohio Judicial Branch, Maureen O'Connor. Justice O'Connor.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to address you this afternoon about a topic that I feel very passionately about, and that is to encourage the voters of Ohio to participate in how we select our judges across this great state. I'm very pleased to lead the discussion about raising the voter awareness about our judicial candidates. I have a limited amount of time, and then we're going to go into a Q&A, so we're going to be able to expound on some of the ideas during that period of time. But first of all, I want to say that I want to share some statistics that are the result of an NCSC, and that's National Center for State Courts poll. And they polled over 1,000 registered voters between November 12 and November 16 of 2014, and here are their findings. The good news is that courts remain the most trusted branch of government, and I don't think that's any surprise. The total confidence level in the United States Supreme Court is 71%. In our state court system is 68%. The executive branch falls to 52%, and the legislative branch a 41% confidence level. Now, compared to a 2012 survey, that's an 8% increase in the number of people who think courts are fair and impartial, and that's the exciting news. 2% increase in the number of people who think courts are unbiased in the way they decide their cases. Again, great news. But there's a troubling split on some of those statistics. 43% agreed with the statement, judges in state courts are selected based on their qualifications and their experience. Then 51% agreed that judges in state courts are there because of personal connections or political influence. Now, I don't think that the two questions could be necessarily mutually exclusive, but it is a little troubling to say that 51% think they're because of personal connections or political influence. Now, another troubling statistic, 48% agreed with the statement that judges in the state courts make decisions based on objective review of facts in the law, and that's the way it should be. 48%, though, is a pretty low figure to have that level of confidence. It should be much higher. 46% agreed with the statement that judges in state courts make decisions based more on their own beliefs and political pressure. That's a very disturbing statistic. Further concerning is that 46% rises to 51% in states with contested partisan elections for state high courts. Now, well, those are national statistics. I'm going to bring us back to Ohio. Back in Ohio, I have been advocating for a judicial reform selection process. And why do we need this? What's the objective? What's the impetus here? We need to strengthen our democracy and support the rule of law. I think that the statistics show that Ohioans, like other voters and citizens across this country, do not really understand a lot about the judiciary, and as a result, their interest and their level of understanding is very superficial. Ohio has one of the best judiciaries, I think, because of the men and women who serve on our bench, and we can be proud of our judiciary. However, we can improve the way we select judges and thereby, I think, enhance confidence in our judiciary. There's three reasons why we must act. Polls show that Ohioans believe that judges are influenced by politics, by contributions, and by other factors. At least a quarter of the electorate, 25% of the people who participate in elections in our state, don't participate in judicial elections. The level of knowledge and the understanding about our judiciary is inadequate, and voters do not have easy access to quality information. I have a 3-point plan that I'm going to touch on briefly. To elevate judicial elections in the public's awareness and consciousness is achievable by moving them to the odd years. Right now, only municipal court elections are in the odd years, and the rest of the elections are in the even years. And my proposal, and it will take a constitutional amendment, so it's not an easy task, but is to move our elections from the even years to the odd years. We will then rebrand that phrase, not odd years, but judicial years for elections. And it will require, as I said, a constitutional amendment and a culture change. But I think it is very doable. We also need to educate voters about judicial elections, to make them informed about making their decisions, and to encourage them to vote for the judiciary. And I think the third point that is important is to increase the basic qualifications to serve as a judge, to make our outstanding judiciary even better. Now, elevate judicial elections means to lift them up, to raise the public's awareness of them, to make them more visible to Ohio voters. We need to demonstrate that the judiciary is no less valuable than the executive branch or the legislative branch to the people of Ohio. Some would argue that it is the branch of government, especially on the local level, that people interact with most and have the most influence and impact on quality of life decisions within their families and their communities. So how can we combine proposals to elevate and recognize the importance of our judiciary? As I said, amending the Constitution to move all judicial races to the odd years, and to make the modest change through the revised code to place judicial races at the top of the ballot. Right now, judicial races are at the very end of the ballot. And that results in something a phenomenon known as ballot fatigue. And it's a real phrase. It's a real term that is used to describe people who go through multiple pages of a ballot, and they get to a certain point and they say, "Phooey, I'm not going to, I'm tired of voting." It's really a phenomenon, and it's unfortunate. But I think that if we move the judicial selection process to the top of the ballot, we move the judicial races to the odd years and call them the judicial years, and we encourage voter participation through education, we'll have eventually an increase in the number of voters who are informed voters about the judiciary. Now, the advantage, as I said, moving to the judicial year scenario, is that the field is less crowded. Judicial elections would get the attention they deserve, and they would be the first thing that the voter sees. Now, we in the even year elections for the judiciary compete with the presidential years or the midterm elections, where you have the gubernatorial and the other statewide elected officials. We have the General Assembly on the ballot. We have local county officials on the ballot, and judges just get lost in the shuffle. The judiciary competes for attention with the partisan candidates, and quite frankly, if you know anything about the nature of a judicial race, that's a pretty hard thing to do. With the amount of money and media attention that is focused on either the presidential, the gubernatorial, other statewide election holders, they're able to shout their message. Their resources are much greater, and they're able to shout their message to the public, where I say that the judges are whispering their message. There's so much shouting and commotion going on around, and it just is not the same when it comes to the impact for the judiciary. Now, I mentioned voter drop-off and ballot fatigue, and the reason for that. There is research on that shows the average 25% of the voters don't vote for judges. An example, in 2012, Cuyahoga County drop-off was 40%. 40% of the people that went to the ballot did not vote for the judiciary, and in 2012, we had Supreme Court, Appellate Court, and Common Pleas Court races in Cuyahoga County. Now, taking the poll to examine statewide drop-off, again, there was over 1,000 individuals surveyed. And half of the respondents reported drop-off in judicial elections. 63% who said they don't vote in judicial elections is because they don't know enough about the judges. And that's actually very true. It's very difficult to find information about the individual candidates for the judiciary. But if you do the math, half of the eligible voters don't come to the polls, plus the rate of judicial drop-off can be anywhere from 25 to 40%. So judges actually are selected by such a minute percentage of the electorate as we have the system right now. We need to do better than that. It's unacceptable. So if we elevate judicial races by moving them to the odd years and the top of the ballot, we're going to increase voter participation. But elevating them is not enough. We have to educate the voters so that they will make informed decisions, informed choices. We are launching the first statewide judicial voter education website on September 1st. It's judicialvotescount.org, and there is a postcard at each one of your places. If you will take that with you, you will see additional information about the website. The most important piece of information is the address, judicialvotescount.org. For the first time, it's going to provide Ohio voters with information on all candidates for the judiciary in all Ohio counties. It will be a centralized repository of easy access to information, and it will focus on all races within the state for the judiciary. You're going to be able to search for candidates by county and to compare candidates side by side. You'll have the same information about each candidate, and you will also have embedded in the information about that candidate other sources of information, possibly endorsements that they've received, their website, information from groups who have newspapers, and other organizations that have weighed in. So it will be a centralized repository of information that will be a one-stop shop for you and anyone else to be able to learn about the judiciary. It will be also a website that contains information on what judges do and descriptions about duties of our different courts. It's amazing the number of people who do not know what the different level of courts are in the state of Ohio, much less what they do. This will be an educational opportunity for voters to understand about the court system as well. We're going to use all kinds of social media for this. We have videos of former judges discussing their experiences and why judges are important. So this will be what we call a very information-rich website, and we hope it'll be a success. It's going to roll out September 1st, and it's in place for this November's municipal elections. It will raise the awareness of judges and judicial candidates to provide information to populate this website. Now, together with the odd years proposal on the top of the ballot, we hope that it will result in more citizens voting for judges and doing so in a more informed way. But I'm not waiting for a constitutional amendment to shift the focus on the judiciary, because we all know how difficult it is to get a constitutional amendment. And so this website is a measure that will allow for voter participation, voter education, and I think will be a true bonus by having more citizens casting votes based on quality, substantive information about the candidates and the qualification for office. Hopefully it's going to put an end to the name game. In closing, I want to acknowledge the very important participation of the partners in this. We have the League of Women Voters of Ohio. We have the Ohio State Bar Association joining forces, the Bliss Institute of Applied Politics at the University of Akron, which will house the website, and the Ohio Newspaper Association and the Ohio Association of Broadcasters. It is going to be a permanent fixture of Ohio judicial elections going forward. It is not done with any taxpayer dollars. This is a lot of volunteer help from a lot of people, and I think that that's absolutely fabulous. And I'm over time, as I can see right now. But I think, in closing, I'm going to say that we envision this to be a model that can be duplicated across the country. And what we are doing here in Ohio with this website to have a one-stop repository for information about the all-important aspect of electing our judges here in the state of Ohio. Elected judges are here to stay. People in Ohio want to elect their judges. Repeatedly on polling, it shows that. Overwhelmingly, it shows that. So we need to make sure that we improve the system that we have. Thank you very much.
Well, it struck me as the Chief Justice was talking about the big drop-off, the voter fatigue at the end of the ballot, that I have covered elections where there has been turnout of 10 to 15% of the voters. So if 15% of the voters are voting and 25% of them drop off, well, numbers are hard, but that's why we're attorneys, but we know that these decisions are being made by a very small number of people. Why does that concern you? Why should we care about that?
Well, I think that more than a very small percentage of our citizens utilize the courts. So they need to be participating in how we select the judiciary, because they are the customers, the consumers that interact with the court. It's like anything else in the election process. You know, people very candidly and cavalierly say, well, if you didn't vote, you've got no reason to complain. That applies here to our judiciary, the quality of our judges. If you don't vote, you've got no reason to complain. However, I think we need to go further than that and help educate and encourage people to vote for the judiciary.
But don't you also think there's a problem? You say if you don't vote, you can't complain. Most people probably couldn't tell you how to judge a judge. Most people in the public, if you would go up to them and say, you know, who's the best judge on the Franklin County Court? They probably couldn't name a judge. So maybe when people go into the ballot, part of the problem is they don't know how to, you know, quantify how that performance has been over the course of their term.
That's true that most people do not know the identity of the judges in Franklin County, but they don't know them on the Supreme Court either, or the United States Supreme Court. But I think that this website will help cure that lack of information about the judiciary. There is a section, a tutorial on the website that explains what the different courts are and what they do, what their jobs are. Domestic relations court, juvenile court, probate court, the municipal courts. Each one of them is broken down with information for the layperson who may not understand the differences between the court in very easy to understand terms. So that's the first step. You educate the public about what a judge does and what the courts do and the subject matter that they, that they cover. And then you can go to the candidates who are there touting their experience, which I think is really important for the individual voter to understand.
How much input will the individual candidates or the veteran judge who's running for re-election, how much input do they have on the information that is about them on the website?
They supply it. We give them a questionnaire and they supply the information. It's their responsibility to then keep that information updated as they're endorsed. And as there are articles written about them, so that that can be embedded into the website, into their section, to keep it current and to keep that information in front of the voter.
You know, bar associations do a pretty good job of asking attorneys, asking their members to weigh in on judges, and the bar associations will come out with whether someone's recommended or highly recommended or not recommended for election. Will voters be able to see what the bar says about the judges?
Yes, it's anticipated that that information will be available on the website under, the candidate's information. You would have, for example, if it's someone that's running for the Ohio Supreme Court, the Ohio State Bar Association has a system where they evaluate, and that would be embedded. The local bar, they do the same thing for their members of the judiciary. There's an organization in Cuyahoga County called Judge for Yourself. So Cuyahoga County judges would have the ability to embed whatever the information is that comes out of that organization. So yes, it's when I say a one-stop shop, you can click on this and go to this evaluation. Click on that, you'll go to this news article. But it'll be, a pretty, I think, easy avenue and vehicle for information gathering.
I know you've been working on this for quite some time. We talked about it more than a year ago, your desire to get this website up and going. just what has this process been like? This had to have been not only the research, but just physically getting the website ready. Has this been something that's been taxing on the Supreme Court?
Well, if it were up to me and had to develop the website, we'd still be working on it. But it's the partnering that I mentioned. All these wonderful organizations that see the value of what we're doing here and the objective. The Bar Association, the Bliss Institute, the League of Women Voters, the Newspaper and Broadcasters Organization. They understand that this initiative is valuable, that it's important, and they jumped on board, 100%. And we wouldn't be here talking about this without the partnership that I was able to, coalesce. And I would be remiss if I didn't say the Supreme Court staff. They were the driving force here. The people that work at the Supreme Court are Chris Davey, who's no longer working at the Supreme Court, but he's here in the audience. I have to give him a lot of credit. Brett Crow. Stephanie Bucher's back there. And I see Mr. Brown there from the Ohio State Bar Association, the League of Women Voters, at the table. And I sat in on a lot of those meetings where they're actually at the table going through the minutia that's involved in this. The Bliss Institute, just a fabulous collaborative effort.
What kind of feedback have you been getting from judges? Are they happy to see this come about, or are they maybe a little reluctant to open themselves up to this kind of scrutiny?
This is, I think, a very well-received avenue for, as I mentioned in my remarks, the ability for a judge to showcase themselves, for a candidate to showcase themselves that are running for judgeship is so limited and oftentimes so expensive, and they don't have the resources. So it costs them nothing to participate in this, and it really is a tool that their citizens in their jurisdiction will take a look at.
How do you get the message out to the public? How do you let voters know that this resource is there for them, and how do you get them interested enough to go to a website and open up and read about the justice system?
Well, I think the ease of operation is going to be very compelling and a very easy sell. We're counting on the media to jump on the bandwagon and talk about this. There's going to be newspaper articles that are written about it, YouTube. We're using all the social media. The bar associations are going to be, getting the word out. It's a bit of a cultural change, absolutely, to have this, and I understand that. So do I think that in November of 2015, we're going to have up to the level we want for scrutiny of the website and use of the website? No, it's an education, just like a lot of projects that we take on in our society to improve our society. You've got to convince folks, and they have to see the value of it. And I think this website will speak for itself.
You mentioned at the end of your remarks the name game, and it's no secret that if your last name is Brown or you have an Irish-sounding name, you have an advantage on the ballot in the state of Ohio. So is that, how do you counteract that? And Colleen is kind of embarrassed to ask someone named O'Connor that, but there is a reality that Irish names or the name Brown are more popular when they appear on the ballot.
They are, and voter education will allow voters to distinguish between the candidates, and that's probably one of the most glaring deficiencies in how people vote. They don't know how to distinguish between candidates. And yes, with a name like O'Connor, that's one of the things I've always thanked my parents for naming me Maureen O'Connor. And so I can talk about it openly, and I have over the years about the Irish, influence in voting. But if the public doesn't have a resource to be able to distinguish and look at the qualifications of a candidate, they're apt to be confused, absolutely. And in pockets of this state, the name game is much more prevalent than others. But, I'll tell you, in the election last year, in 2014, there was a prominent Irish, name against one of our sitting justices that had a prominent French name, and, the Francophile one. So what can I say?
Well, you also talked about, which I think is going to be a much tougher road for you, which is getting that constitutional amendment to change the voting years and to have what's known as the judicial years. Are you working with someone in the legislature, or what is your process now of trying to get that off the ground?
It will require getting sponsors and getting winning over the hearts and minds of the legislature to do that, no doubt. I've been a little busy in the last 6 months working with the legislature on another project that was pretty important to the judiciary, and that was our judicial compensation increase, and that took quite a bit of time over the last 6 months. So now, this is my new mission, is to, work on the relationships that I was able to build, in our previous efforts, and to, move forward on this. And I know a constitutional amendment is a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to create it, to pass it through the legislature, to get it on the ballot, and then to campaign for it and have the public understand what it's all about, to move these judicial. My response to that is, so what if it's hard? We still have to do it. We have to start. We can't be discouraged because it's difficult to do. I look back on, and use this as an example, women's suffrage. Do you think every woman in America voted the first opportunity she had in 1920 once it passed? No, of course not. It was a cultural shift. It was a paradigm shift. People had to understand, but now more women than men vote in our elections. So it's worth it. It definitely is worth it.
Some of those statistics that you were reading were startling. What surprised you the most when this research came back? You were trying to figure out how Ohio voters think, what voters care about when they go to the polls. What did you find to be the most startling?
My concern here is what voters think judges do and how they do their jobs. And I think that there's so many moving factors in that, and I really do, I rail against this all the time, is that judges are not portrayed, and neither is the legal profession, lawyers as a whole, in a very favorable light in our country. Given the ridiculous judge shows that are on in the afternoon, people have no idea what judges do if they base it on that. And
you
a lot
don't
of
like
people,
paternity court?
Oh, God. It just is, it's a travesty that people who are not educated about our judicial system and the courts look at that and think that there is reality there. And then you look at the evening drama shows that involve judges and lawyers, and nobody is ever favorably, displayed in those situations. Judges are either incompetent or corrupt or curmudgeons or ignoramuses or whatever, and lawyers don't fare much better. So we need to counter the way the media perceives our profession, the way the media perceives our courts, and we have to do it through an education effort.
But isn't the reality that most people don't appear in a courtroom unless they're getting divorced? The vast majority of people never encounter a relationship with a judge. So, it's one thing to say we're going to have this website set up, but people don't really experience what the courtroom is like, do they?
Well, that's, people get traffic tickets. People have disputes, with landlord-tenant. People have contracts that are breached. They may have issues, from something that they purchased. Divorce and dissolution is obviously one. Oftentimes, that's not just, let's go in the court and let's get divorced, and now we've got a separation agreement, and we're going to abide by that, because then there's child custody issues and support issues. So it's a continuing involvement. Juvenile court and all of the subject matter that juvenile court, these courts are making decisions that affect the quality of lives for the people that are in front of them. Not everybody gets to the Supreme Court. We get that.
understand that. But this lower courts that impact the people's lives, I think, most significantly on a day-to-day basis. And everybody has a family member who's had to go to court for some reason or another, if not themselves. And I think people who are in that situation feel very strongly about the quality of service that they have experienced, because we are public servants. And we have to be cognizant of that as a judiciary, and we need the people to understand that they are dealing with public servants and a commodity that they're paying for through their tax dollars, and they should want the very best.
Some people might argue, well, federal judges are appointed, and that system works very well. There's a perception that federal judges, once they make the bench, they're going to be guided by their conscience, that they aren't influenced by politics. Would you favor a system where, nearly all the judges would just simply be appointed?
Well, I think that the people's, talk about a court that is so remote from the day-to-day operation of people. Most people don't go to the courts, let alone the federal courts. And they take 5% of the caseload in this country goes to the federal courts, and 95% goes to the state courts. So that kind of gives you a perspective on the operation of the federal system. As far as having an appointed system, overwhelmingly, when the polls are taken, when the opportunity has been presented for Ohioans to weigh in on the subject matter, we want to elect our judges. They don't understand some of the nuances of electing their judges, and that's what this initiative is supposed to do. It's supposed to help them understand that and become more informed voters and more informed citizens.
I do want to remind you that in just a few minutes, we're going to be taking questions from the audience, and we will be asking you to line up at the mic and identify yourself, not give us a speech, but just ask a question of the Chief Justice. And I will ask now my final question, which is, how are you going to judge the success of this? Will you, 1 year from now, what are you hoping that you will see that comes out of this kind of multi-pronged initiative?
One of the really easy measures is going to see how many hits we get, how many people actually use this website. We will probably at some point, I would envision, have the ability for public comment on the website, maybe after the election, and it'll be a work in progress. I'm kind of thinking that maybe we'll ask people, how would you like to see this improved? And have a forum for people to communicate with us, again, anonymously, but to give us ideas on what the consumer would think about the website and for any improvement. But traffic on the website will be a great indicator. And we also look at voter participation. And if we see a decrease in the number of, in the percentages of drop-off, we will know that there is a factor at work, and I'm going to take credit for it.
Well, that's a smart thing to do. We do have a question, some questions, people coming up. And while they're lining up, I guess I'll also ask you, who's going to manage the website? How do you?
It's the Bliss Institute.
Oh, okay.
It is a nonpartisan a group of academics that are doing this for us. We're very grateful.
That's great. And Carol?
I'm Carol Looper, and my question is, during the election cycle, there are forums and debates where the candidates appear opposite each other. But because of the canons of judicial ethics, judges are really restricted. They have to be independent. They can't tell you what opinions they've had in the past. So what, besides their educational background and their work history, can you learn about judges?
Well, actually, judges can talk about their opinions. They can talk about the positions they've held in writing, both in the type of cases they've held. If they're a trial court judge, if they're an appellate judge, they can talk about cases that they've authored. They can tout those as being very representative of their judicial philosophy. So there is a lot more information that they can talk about than just name, rank, and serial number. I think that they can also talk, and this is something that I have mentioned before. I can tell you personally how I feel about something or my thought process on a social, political issue, but I can only couch that in terms of I will not let my personal opinion, if it is contrary to the law, influence how I interpret the law as it is applied to the facts that come before me. So when judges say, I can't give you my personal opinion on something, I think you can, but you can couch it in, you have to couch it in the terms that no matter what my personal opinion is, it will not interfere on how I interpret and do my job. I can't bring things like my religion to play. I can't bring things about, my personal views. We just had, quite frankly, an issue over that after the Obergefell decision. And then we have an opinion out of our professional conduct, the Board of Professional Conduct, instructing judges. And they touch on that, on the ability of the judge to do their job in spite of their personal convictions.
Go ahead.
I'm Eileen Paley. I'm on Columbus City Council and Chair of Judiciary and Court Administration for the city, as well as a candidate for Franklin County Municipal Court this year. So I'm very interested in what you're talking about and didn't even know about the website. But I have a couple questions. Can you reference the website on the candidate's website?
Can the candidate put that on their website?
Yes.
I don't see any reason why not.
Okay, and then is there going to be a movement? I mean, I've helped judicial candidates over the years, and the biggest issue that we've had in the past is actually talking them into screening with the bar associations, because there's been some party politics involved. And I'm kind of getting tired of that argument. And so if we're going to put it on a website, is there a movement to have regulations or rules about how the screening procedure is going to go forward and be unified across the state, since you're now putting it on a statewide website?
That's a local issue with the local bars. That's not something that the Supreme Court would, be involved with.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Brad. My question is, if you're trying to build an army, and the idea is to elevate the information level, would it make sense for a chief to, say, conscript all the visiting judges who no longer stand for elections and have them speak at each county of the 88, and not just the bar associations, because lawyers are more likely to know more about the judges, but what about the Flower Association or the civic associations or the art museums? Why wouldn't you use that power you have as the chief over the visiting judges, and maybe enlist some of the appellate judges that are here to go and actually speak in every one of the 88 counties? Would that help?
About the website, is that what you're saying?
About the idea of here's where you could look for the website, but also here's what judges do. Because I think you're right, people don't know the difference between judges. That's the question.
That is true. I would like to see our schools do a better job of educating our children on all levels about the judiciary. But you don't have to be a VJ, a visiting judge, in order to take that task on. Local groups are always asking for speakers, and if judges, even judges on the bench, would make themselves available to go to, the service clubs that usually are looking for a luncheon speaker. They have their meetings every week. They're dying to get people to, come and speak. So, the judges should be able to do that for themselves and keep out in the public eye about what they're doing. What's the life of, what's a day in the life of a municipal judge like? What's the day in the life of an appellate judge? And fashion a speech and talk to the service organizations, to evening groups that are looking for these civic groups, go into the high schools and talk. It's an educational opportunity that being a judge does not preclude you from taking advantage of. I strongly advocate for that.
Dan?
Thank you. Justice O'Connor, Dan Conway, Porter Wright, thank you for taking the time to appear here with us, and thank you, Colleen, for your insightful questions. I have two more questions. One, with regard to the website, what measures are going to be taking, or what will be in place to prevent misuse of the website, either by the judicial candidates themselves or if others are able to add information by others? And then secondly, with regard to the off year or the judicial year approach that you've indicated you're supporting, do you have any concern about there being yet an additional drop-off in comparison to what occurs during say, the midterm elections from the four-year elections?
Thank you for your questions. First of all, the candidate won't have the ability to manipulate the website, nor will anybody else. It'll be controlled by the Bliss Institute. And if there's information to be added, that will go to them, the Bliss Institute, and that technology is in place to do that. So I don't think that there's the ability to misuse it or manipulate it. As far as it's widely known that fewer people show up in the odd years to vote as opposed to the general election where it's the governor or the president that it's on the ballot. And again, this is what I alluded to in the cultural change. Initially, it may increase because people will realize that, oh, this is the year I have to go and vote for my members of the judiciary. But I think as time passes and the effort is a concerted effort, an ongoing effort, people will realize that this is an election for judges. These are the judicial years. As I said, it'll be an evolution. It'll be a cultural evolution. And it will take time for it to mature to the optimum level, but it is an effort worth making.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Cassia Saracola. I'm an attorney here in town. I'm licensed to practice law in Brazil and here in Ohio. And I'm also the new chair of the International Law Committee at the CBA. I have a question regarding immigrant voters and what are the efforts or tools that are actually being made available for voters who are not originally from the U.S. and have the right to vote because they're citizens, and it's estimated that at least half of immigrants in Ohio right now have the right to vote. Does the website contain any tools, or is it going to be translated in any other languages or any other programs or anything like that that is being tailored or targeted to immigrant voters?
I think that's an excellent question about the language access issues, and that kind of reflects an even bigger issue that we've been working on at the court in conjunction with many partners, and that's the access to justice. And yes, language access is extremely important. Right now, this website will be in English. If we, as in November of 2015, it's an English-speaking website. As we go forward, we will explore the ability to, branch out into, another translated website. We can look at that. I can't make any promises because I don't know what that would entail. As far as the capacity for the Bliss Institute to do that. But touching base with organizations that deal with our immigrant citizens is another avenue of opportunity for this website and this program to be rolled out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chief Justice. Bill Weisenberg. You probably have thought of this already as far as rolling this out. There are tens of thousands of high school seniors who are going back to school this fall. Many of them will probably be voting or have the opportunity to vote for the first time this year. Has there any thought been given to taking this program into the classrooms? You mentioned high schools. Taking it into the classroom in the fall of this year, showing this website. The suggestion was made maybe with retired judges and others, going in there and explaining the role of judges, but displaying the website and then giving them an opportunity to have a learning experience while in high school this year. Because if they see it, maybe they'll tell their parents about it, tell their friends about it, and it could have a domino effect. But just a thought, if it may have been already considered, but just an opportunity this year. And I think through Colleen Marshall and other broadcasters to spread that word this year through the television and other vehicles, the word could get out. But just a thought for you.
That's a great idea, Bill. I'm glad you mentioned it. We'll take a look at that about asking for volunteers to do just that, to go into the high schools if there's the opportunity to address individual classes or maybe clubs that they may have at the high schools as well. Great idea. Thanks.
Thank you all.
Well, thank you. And it's an exciting project to hear about. And I think all of us, many of whom are lawyers, and you've got a media person who's also a lawyer who's going to promote this program, I'm sure, as well. I just want to thank the Chief Justice and also Colleen Marshall, my colleague at Porter Wright. The sponsors for today, the Porter Wright, the Daily Reporter, the partners for today, the League of Women Voters and the Ohio State Bar Association. Remember, you can see this again, or tell your friends about it so they can see it on CTV, Columbus Television, on WOSU and PBS affiliates statewide, the Ohio Channel, and anytime on CMC's website via YouTube. Again, thanks, Chief Justice Maureen O'Connor, my colleague Colleen Marshall, and thanks to all of you for attending.